Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
You can go ahead, Debbie.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Hi. I've been asked to chair the meeting today in Father Graham's absence, so I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I have 4:02. Let's start with the roll call. Father Graham is a known absence. Cheryl Rose.
Present.
Deborah Alsop, I'm here. Marcia Futel.
I'm here.
Terry England.
I'm here.
Anthony Hobson. Pastor Tate.
Present.
Gary Lindgren. Micah Camrus.
I'm here.
Bianca Edwards.
Here.
Did I hear Bianca?
Yes, here.
Okay. Odell Owens.
Present.
Vanessa White. Laura San Regret.
Here.
Christine Fisher.
Here.
Sally Westheimer.
Here.
Okay. I would like to begin with reading the following. Please note that in conjunction with Ohio State's revised sunshine laws and the rule limiting the number of people who may meet in a space and who may so meet, CPP has decided to convene this board meeting via video conference. In accordance with Ohio Public Records and Open Meeting Laws, CPP has advertised the meeting on its website in advance and has provided a link for members of the public to listen and view the meeting. This meeting will be recorded and a copy of the meeting, including any documentation, will be made available via the CPP website under the area Board of Directors. Approve meeting minutes as soon as practically possible after the meeting. Just a friendly reminder to silence all or mute all electronic devices, and when not speaking, mute yourself. I would like to at this time just announce that Maura Ware, the President and CEO of the United Way of Greater Cincinnati, will be joining us as the observer from the United Way. For the minutes, I would like to note appreciation to Leisha Lyman, who served as the observer for United Way for over 3 years. Alicia has gone on to other career opportunities. We wish her well, and please note that in the minutes. Okay, the next item is agenda approval. You all have the agenda before you. It was one of the pre-reads. Are there any corrections, comments on the agenda? I will ask for a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
I'm gonna give that to Odell, and second to Sally Westheimer. On a motion by Odell Owens, seconded by Sally Westheimer, to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Next on our agenda is a mission moment video, and I'm going to turn that over to Shara to tee that up for us.
Sorry, Debbie, you haven't approved the agenda. I think you approved the minutes before
Okay,
that.
sorry. I did ask for any comments, but let's go back to the agenda. Were there any comments on the agenda? Okay, so I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved. It's Terry.
Who's that? Terry England. Second.
Second, Marcia.
Okay. On a motion by Terry England and seconded by Marcia, let's vote on the minutes. All in favor?
Agenda.
Aye.
I'm sorry, the agenda.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Second,
Aye.
okay. Agenda, approved. The minutes, I believe, have been approved. Let's move on to mission moment. Shara, do you want to introduce that?
Absolutely. So we have been out in the field since the reopening on June 1st and visiting providers in a safe way and really trying to have people see up close and personal what's happening in the preschool and childcare industry. And doing that, we would have loved to have someone join you live, but it's hard for them to get away during their day. So we're sharing with you one of the stops that we made when we go out on our Mondays and Fridays to check in with providers, asked to share their story and what's happening with them. And I think Lakeisha and Laura have been doing a good job of kind of telling the story of what's happening now with our preschool promise providers. And with that, I'll ask Leslie to initiate the video. Seems like we may be having some technical difficulties. Do we want, because we have such a packed agenda, do we want to try to tee that up and go ahead and move forward with some of the other items on the agenda?
Yes, that's a great idea. So Leslie, we're gonna go ahead with the next item, which we need to take some time on the reopening update. And if we have time, we'll slot that back in around the executive director CEO update. So Shara?
So reopening update, we just wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of what is happening. We have 83% of our providers said that they're opening in June, 11% that are opening later in the year. And that is not related in most cases to COVID at all, but many didn't have summer programs. We have a good mix of QI providers and TA providers that are opening. And a little update on our extended learning session. As of 2 o'clock today, we have 200 students enrolled at 39 sites that are actually returning to the classroom and taking advantage of that extended learning session opportunity. All of our providers are following very closely the Responsible Restart Ohio. If many of you haven't seen what those changes mean, is it is not only increased sanitation and hand washing, it is new ratios for every classroom. That is a 1-to-9 ratio. There are physical dividers and spacing requirements that are new for many providers. And there is also a new requirement to not only report any COVID exposures to JFS, as would normally happen with any exposure, but also to the Department of Health. And on Monday, ODJFS kind of released a protocol for what to do with any expected exposures, which I'll talk about a little bit later in my executive director's report. There also was the announcement, since we last met in May, of $60 million in grants from ODJFS for providers. Those are for COVID-19 payments to cover the lost fees and increased costs related to COVID-19 protocols, as well as ratio payments to make sure that providers can try to stay somewhat whole given those reduced ratios. I sent in the pre-read the full guidance and instructions from JFS on that, as well as some highlights. Those are available to all providers, 0 to 5. It is based on the number of students that are enrolled during the first 2 weeks in June. There are different rules and ratios for family child care providers and centers, and it is an online application and reconciliation process in which providers will also be asked to turn in receipts and documentation of what they have purchased. For some providers, it was an easy application process, but as you can imagine, there were many questions about what qualified as acceptable payments and acceptable things to spend on those grants. So that is kind of a snapshot of what's happening in the field of early childhood education and preschool. On the second page of the reopening update, You will also see direct actions that we've taken as Preschool Promise since May to be responsive to our provider and our family needs. We've had 69 families and providers had direct delivery of food boxes through contactless delivery by Amazon. We have made 618 parents reached. And so that doesn't mean calls and messages left. That doesn't mean emails sent. That means 618 parents that a member of our team actually had a conversation with during this time to check in on how they're doing, to introduce them to the extended learning session as well. We continue to see growing numbers of our providers that are joining in the African American Chamber of Commerce. And at our last report out from them, they said of the 34 webinars that they've had during this pandemic period, 70% of those were attended by a Cincinnati Preschool Promise provider that took advantage of that complimentary membership for business supports and other activities. Ongoing, what we're doing is that there is a work group that came together to talk about local implementation of pandemic work group resources. That group is also came together to seek funds like the homegrown application and other resources to leverage our dollars to support all providers in Southwest Ohio. We had a very generous donation from Hamilton County that gave us 2 pallets of supplies. So we integrated that with deliveries to providers. And I'm pleased to say we were able to make 161 classrooms worth of deliveries in about 2 weeks to get those materials out to them. And we're continuing to meet with CPS and other of our stakeholder partners to talk about and plan for what those remote learning options may look like to be best for preschoolers and kindergartners. So that is kind of our snapshot and what's been happening in the reopening since June 1st.
Are there any questions or comments from board members?
How do people qualify to get the food boxes?
We simply asked providers to submit us names. The Freestone Food Bank was very generous. We turned in those names and then they took it from there. We made the connection, but there were very little requirements and limitations for that delivery based on a grant that was through June 30th.
Was that grant through the regional fund?
I am uncertain of that, Dr. Owens,
Okay.
who it came through, because we really tried to connect the resources. And when Foods for Free Bank said this opportunity is available, just submit the names, we then turned it over to them to manage.
And again, can you just tell me again, the 64 boxes went to how many different centers?
So we had 14 centers, and some centers distributed them themselves. They distributed whole boxes or broke up boxes. And then some of those also went directly to families. So we had a mix of both.
14 centers participated. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Just the reaching the parents directly, fantastic work. Good job on that. I know that the 619 reached, or 18 doesn't begin to say how many calls and emails and effort you've made. So that's important. Good job.
Thank you. And I will say some of it was calls, but we also, I've seen parents in the supermarket. So we did our safe distancing talks. We've seen parents out at locations. So it's a variety of places that we are starting to all have a growing sense of recognition of face in person with the Preschool Promise. And we're frequently stopped and say, hey, aren't you the Preschool Promise person? So it's a way for us to engage with parents that way as well.
Shara, great job. You centers have been open since June 1st, and we haven't even gotten to June 30th. Great job.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. This is Step Up to Quality Coaching contracts, and what we're asking today is for a presentation by the staff for information and some specific approvals that we need to move forward on today. So I'm gonna ask that Shara and Brittany provide us the background on this.
Thank you so much, Debbie. You know that we came to you in February and said we wanted to extend to 3 to 5 coaching, knowing that our coaching contracts would need to be extended on June 30th, and said we would come back to you and report what our recommendation was for that. Then the pandemic came, and so we slowed down a little bit, but what we quickly realized is that we really needed to do a deep dive with our coaching so that we clearly understood that there were measures of the success and stories that we could tell about the coaching other than just, did someone reach high quality or not? Did they do a star move or not? That the story of coaching was much richer, and given the investment that everyone makes of time, energy, and dollar of that, the great job that all of our coaching vendors do, it was worthwhile for us to really do a deep dive and understand what that investment meant and the importance of coaching. So we started with 4C because they are the partner that has the largest percentage of our coaching. They do a lot of that work, and they really have partnered with us to say, how do we look at this differently? Partly because of their history of doing that and their success, and also because they're the CCRNR and an arm in some ways of the state that helps do that. We are also working collaboratively with CAA and Learning Grove to deep dive on that data as well and do those contracts. They are also providers. So at this time we prioritized and said, what information can we get from 4C and how will we model that looking forward as we negotiate and do extensions for the other contracts. So the outcomes and preliminary data and progress that you will see here is related to 4C outcomes, but there are comparable outcomes from our other vendors as well. And we'll look forward to sharing that with you in August. The remarkable thing about this is what I really asked 4C to show us is what would have happened in the field but for the investment that has been made in coaching, right? But for CPP being able to reach out and say, how do we invest more and do more of this? And so you can see some high level statistics there, really that the difference between those who made a quality rating move of any kind is 42% for those that weren't engaged with CPP and 92% for those that were. The family child care progress in 2019, we had 17 increase to high quality. We fully anticipated 20 to increase to high quality in 2020, but they are still pending review by ODJFS to get those star ratings. The key facts on coaching on the right side are things that many of you already know, having been involved in this process for a long time. To say that the coaching is very complex, that it is dependent upon each provider's availability, learning style, what happens at that provider location, and how they move. Also to acknowledge that 4C and our partner in this is funded to support family child care only to reach 1 star. So any support that would have happened to family child care past reaching that 1 star would not have happened but for the CPP investment. We are going back and looking at all of the data, all of the timesheet, all of the work that was done actually since 2017 in coaching so that we can give you a snapshot, lifetime of the levy, what has happened in coaching, what is in that movement, what have been the inputs, and what is the outcome. As you can imagine, that is a manual process with manual timesheets, and that we're trying to collate all that data to be able to bring to you a snapshot of what that looks like, and that also helps us plan going forward. How will we continue to make this investment and what things are most important? We do have easy accessible data that is related to the spend by provider based on equipment and supplies. We don't have exact comparable data through the lifetime of the levy that relates to that for how much coaching was invested. And that's really what we're trying to get to be able to share. On the next slide, you will see what our ask is today after that brief overview of coaching, is that is in principle to approve the extension of the contracts with these changes. There is a process going on, and Jake Purcell is on the phone with us as well, and that we are revising all of the details of the contract, and I'm asking that we have a small subcommittee work on that to refine those details and execute those extensions. What I've provided for you here today are the highlights and the major fundamental parts of those contracts that will change in the scope of work going forward. And that is an hourly rate increase by 5% and a flat rate of $14,200 a month. If you will recall, we moved to a flat rate for 3 to 5 coaching and maintained an hourly rate for the 0 to 2 coaching. What we're proposing now is a mix of the two, partly because we wanted to maintain the integrity of making sure that those who had assigned coaches maintain that relationship, and we could only do that with a mix of the two rate. Going to an all flat rate as we had originally proposed and discussed would not have allowed us to do that. There are new provisions that will have a minimum and a maximum monthly hour billing, and that will be based on what's been approved in our budget. Many of you may know that the current scope of work has no cap, right? The maximum for that cap is proposed at 1,000 hours a month. Currently, we're averaging about 670 to 680 a month. So that's more than enough room, we believe, to operate within the approved budget amount. You will also see enhanced reporting requirements so that we never have to reach back again to try to compile that data. We do that with our partners who have much of that information, sharing it with us in a way that we can truly tell the story and value of coaching. And we appreciate 4C in taking the lead in saying, how can we match what data you have and are allowed to share with the data that we need for ongoing measures to really talk about progress reports, what domains of the Step Up to Quality system are most relevant, how do we know when we've reached milestones and what those are, and how does it look like and what could we offer for those providers that are in the CPP footprint but have not yet joined or partnered with CPP. You're in CPS, you're out there, but you're not a part yet of the CPP family. Having a regular tap on who those providers are will help us try to recruit, understand, build our relationship with them so that we are not in a competitive environment, but truly a cooperative one that drives everyone in the footprint toward an early childhood education. So that is a snapshot of the major changes in the scope of work that we're requesting approval for. And I will open it, I guess, to questions and also ask if Jake has anything to add about the process that we've talked about going through to get these extensions done.
Shara, how did you decide on 5%? That's certainly above any increase I've seen. I mean, 5% is bigger than inflation. How'd you come up with 5%?
We actually asked 4C for input and said, what does the cost look like for this? How do we get closer to covering all the costs that are actually there? There's a laundry list of things that CPP has been able to take advantage of that were not enumerated or necessarily contemplated in previous contracts. And when we asked them, what is the effort to outcomes for this enhanced increased reporting, for the extra things that CPP asked to help us explain the story, to leave, you know, in some ways, a coaching cohort in a different way that another vendor or Strec coaching may have. And that was the amount that we came to agree upon to say, for the effort that's put in and the things that we think are reasonable for us to cover for the demands, increased demands that we're asking, that's what the amount comes to.
Boy, but we can make that same kind of argument for our staff. So I hope that when we do, we give them the correct raise as well.
In every case, we would do that cost benefit analysis, but I'm pleased to hear you say that, because as we do evaluations and look at that, we try to be mindful, you know, in submitting those capacity reports and what that looks like, and region-wide surveys of what the rate is and what's happening.
So my question then becomes how everybody in the nation is cutting back, and a lot of corporations are filing for bankruptcy. And our work, while it continues and it's intense, I'm still not convinced that we're going to be doing the amount of coaching that we are budgeting for. And I truly don't understand how we're showing or offering an increase at this point when everything in every level of business is either cutting back or staying flat. So I'm challenged by that. And then again, who are we coaching? The state has put on hold its process for a step of the quality, and I haven't seen anything that said it's going to start back up. So what are we going to be saying to people other than COVID-19 and enrollment? What are we going to be coaching people through to maintain their stars?
So I can respond to, I think, all of three of those, Pastor Tate. I think though we know that the state has said, given themselves to the end of September to start awarding stars again on the Step Up to Quality system, what we know are site visits and reviews are happening now. We know that those are.
That's not my question. My question is, if everybody in the nation is cutting back, there are more companies that are now laying off because of funding. Even the hospitals have cut back on their staff, and they are considered to be essential workers. States and cities are now, budgets are failing. How is it that we are proposing an increase in a service that is on hold until the state releases it? Who are we coaching and what are we coaching them to if there's nowhere for them to go for the next 4 months? So can we revisit the increase in 2021, But for right now, how do we justify with anybody, especially because CPS is cutting back, that we're going to be increasing in our contracts for services that are going to be limited? So we're going to pay them the more, we're going to pay more for coaching, and they can do less coaching. And then we have three organizations that are doing coaching that doesn't measure to the same amount of centers that are currently open or are trying to reopen. So I'm really confused.
So if I may
Brittany-
speak,
Brittany would like to speak.
yes, I have a couple responses to that. Yes, I agree. There are global cutbacks that are occurring, including within our childcare system. With that being said, some of the coaching is going to go towards how do I make this work with our new environment? It's different, and it was already challenging with the ratio requirements. But now because it's been reduced, providers, teachers, and parents are having to learn a new way of how the early childhood system works. And the coaches are going to be the first front line to support those folks with learning, how to make this successful. Also, in terms of our role with servicing the community, the goal is to provide more quality seats. And we're going to need that now more than ever with the reduced ratios. And so we still need to support our QI providers with reaching high quality so that they're then eligible for our tuition assistance reimbursement. We have come up with innovative ways to provide coaching. Some are slowly entering into the facilities. Others are still using remote options. And to be quite frank, the remote options have been more effective over the last 2 months than what they were during the typical scheduled visits in person. Less cancellations, more engagement from the teachers and providers. And I feel like that justifies the need to not only to continue supporting these providers with professional development, but to expand it, to provide more of that.
So this is Vanessa, and I still think we're not answering Pastor Tate's question. I don't think that, first of all, in order for the district to preserve keeping all of their employees intact, they cut back all contracted services and will only be bringing back online services that are relevant to keeping children safe. So I do think, when we're talking about going into a levy, that we need to be conscious of all of these additional asks. I've been struggling with this budget for a minute. So now I'm looking at a contract. He's not saying, he's asking for the justification of both of those things. But I do think that I'm confused about why we're not revisiting everyone's role. And I'm just one thing that was really compelling to me was that this former coach, he was doing a presentation, and you would know him if I gave too many details, but basically he was, with a corporation back during the recession, and this was in 2008, and they had to cut a significant amount of people. And he said they never brought those people back because they figured out a way to do it more efficiently. So I'm really confused, and maybe it's because I came on and didn't hear the first part, how we're adding a master coach, and then we have you, and then we have which was the master coach was instead of expanding coaching, not in addition to. So it just gets really confusing when I was sitting on, I'm a member of the strategic management team for the district. And, when I came at this, the reason that I was very effective early on when we were doing like the negotiations was because I understood both systems. And right now I just continue to be really, really confused about the direction we're headed in when we could literally be facing fewer funds if in the community's questions. I don't know if anybody else sat on and heard, they had so many people signed up to speak last night. When the community's questions are very different than what is being provided here. And so I guess I'm not understanding when Pastor Tate is saying, why are we doing increases when people are not sure even if the money exists because we're collecting fewer taxes. People are losing their homes. We just lost a bunch of businesses, so people can't even afford to do stuff. And we're giving this image that we have more money when we don't even know if we're going to have. I mean, maybe y'all 100% positive that the levy's going to pass. I'm not 100% positive in this environment. I was on another call with Detroit. I just looked at the numbers from the health commissioner. We have 40 new cases. Things are surging. And so I don't understand why I keep hearing us want to add more money to a budget that's already, if you put the district's budget and our budget together, it exceeds $15 million. And I don't care how much you have in a reserve. People expect you to hold a reserve. The first 2 years, we kept talking about a reserve. John Pepper kept saying reserve, reserve, reserve. So if you start talking about spending down a reserve when we're in a pandemic still, like as though people have forgotten, I don't really understand why every time we turn around, we come to a board meeting, you guys want to give more money, like there's this like big pot of money that's like some corporation just threw a bunch of money at us or something. I'm just getting confused about how everybody's talking about cutting back, and every time we have a meeting, you guys are adding to the bottom line.
I'm going to unmute for a second, and I'd like to go back to, I believe, what we approved as a 90-day budget at the last board meeting. Some of the things that we talked about was that the changing environment. This was brought to the board, I believe, in late February, around a framework to look at, the renegotiation as of July 1st. Is that the date for these renewals? So I share concerns too about the budget, but I also think that this investment, and these are one-year contracts, is that correct? They're not multiple years. I think we need to try as best we can to address Pastor Tate and Vanessa's concerns, but I think that we need to, as a board, move some action today with respect to giving the staff the ability to negotiate these contracts. So that's my point of view. So I'm asking for other board members to weigh in on this. And then I'd like Jake to speak up on the process. Other board members?
Yeah, I have a perspective that may be off a little bit about what Vanessa and Pastor Tate are saying. I believe so strongly that the only way to reach more and more children with high quality care is to ensure that every environment where they attend, every early learning environment, is high quality. And I would definitely not recommend putting on the brakes to increase the improve the environments where young children are in our community. And so that's part of why I would urge us going forward with our efforts to reach high quality. The other thing is that historically, our entire existence, we over budget, and it turns out that we don't spend what we say we're going to spend in some of these big areas. So while this looks like an increase, it is based on actual delivery. I mean, there's a minimum plus a unit cost or a minimum, and then if they exceed that, a unit cost. It seems to me that if we really are delivering on improving quality, I just think we ought to allow for that flexibility, that unit rate, and get as many people up to quality as possible.
So how do we get people to a place that they can't go to until the state releases it and we don't have any definites on that? Again, I'm not against coaching. Let me be clear. I'm asking why we increase.
That's just a technical holdup. I mean,
Right, I understand. I just want to know, why are we increasing when no one else is increasing around the country? How are we justifying an increase to a service that is really limited? And plus, most of it is virtual in most cases. And so I'm just saying, I appreciate the coaching. I celebrate the coaching. Why are we increasing a contract if we can provide the same level of service at the same rate? We're going to a flat rate, which is guaranteed money. So I don't have to increase a contract in order to get services. I'm looking at the people that I'm serving and the population that I'm serving, and it's uncertain. So I don't want to show an increase in a service that I can get and maintain for the rate that I currently have. That's all I'm asking, is why are we increasing?
Pastor Che, a couple of things. The state has resumed during their step up to quality visits and desk reviews. We just recently had one provider achieve 3 stars as of the 9th of this month. Also, we have all, except for one that is uncertain, of our programs, that is QI and TA, who are will be resuming child care services, whether it's now or starting in the fall.
And I agree, and I celebrate that. Again, I'm not questioning that. Why are we increasing? What more can we offer to foresee that is going to justify an increase in a contract? Everybody else is cutting contracts. Keep it flat, and then let them continue to provide the service that we have. But at this point, I don't know how many more centers are we going to be able to transition from QI to TA. And I'm more concerned about those that are not in either. And so I don't see what effort we have, what progress we've made there. I would love to see those numbers from last year to this year. But again, coaching is needed, it's necessary. I just cannot understand for the life of me how we, one of the only organizations in the nation, to be putting forth an increase when everybody else is cutting back and even cutting out. That's all I'm asking, increase. I'm not questioning coaching. I'm questioning, why are we doing an increase?
The slide that's up on the screen now identifies the reasons why we are increasing or making adjustments.
Brittany, has there been an increase in centers who are starting up and wanting to be in Cincinnati Preschool Promise? Or do we see that coming about?
Absolutely. And right now, you know, just as we're trying to learn what are the needs are going to be for the providers in terms of dealing with the new reality, we have not accept or approved new applicants, but we have definitely received an uptake on applications for quality improvement.
Okay, because I do know that there are a number of centers who were getting ready to open, and then when the pandemic occurred, they had to back down and step back a little bit. And then there were centers who were trying to go forward to either get the 1 star before June 30th, but also the licensing and the step up the quality process has started back up, but that has included new cases coming on with the COVID-19 as well. So they're not only looking at the star ratings, but they're also looking at whether there are going to be cases within the staff-child ratio, that the lower staff-child ratios, and how we can circumvent that. So I know there are a lot of issues to that. So could that be implanted in your proposal for increase? I know that was a lot, but
It was.
So, Brittany, if you want to respond, I also want to weigh in and try to be responsive to what Pastor Tate's question was about the increase and the hold. So I don't know if we've addressed the on hold issue, because the reality is nothing has been on hold. Coaching has continued throughout this period, because as you know, it is not as if someone can get coached for 30 days and immediately move. Some people have taken a year to get moved. Some people have taken 2 years to get moved. Some people had years of coaching prior to CPP even being here before the movement happened. And yes, to your point, Ms. Terry, some people have been inspired by finally only having downtime to be able to work on what they needed to do to position their center to do it better and to move that coaching in partnership with CPP. They finally had some of the stresses taken off during that period of closure to say we can focus on that. In terms of the increase, what I can tell you is there are many things that were related to service delivery, coaching, hours that we got, for lack of a way of saying it any differently, that CPP benefited and got for free, that 4C has said we are no longer in an economic position to provide those same services for free. And then talking about overall increases and decreases in budget, I think many are cutting back on budget overall and on traditional things they've done, but many are also making strategic investments in the things that make a difference and matter. And I think what I took from the CPS series of laying out kind of what they're going to do in strategic partners and where they were going to do the spending, some things they needed to spend less on and some things they needed to spend more on because the environment has changed and the critical way that you had to move. And we're saying what this is an area where we need to keep increased investment is our proposal. And if the budget changes and if those funds are not available, there's an immediate way that we can control this by one, reducing the hourly rate, or talking with our 4C partners to say we have a 30-day window and we're no longer going to be able to maintain that minimum or maximum. That is the control that comes with the hourly rate that can reduce it.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that as well. And you know, the reality is we don't know what we don't know going forward. We have created a budget that we believe gives us the flexibility to do what we need to meet our mission. And we're going to have to stay tight and in communication about doing the right things and the best possible things to make that happen. But one of the things I'm hearing here is it's kind of, you know, especially if we're having more centers have the time because they've had a little bit of a break to be able to think about, okay, now I need to go in for QI. It's like we're seeing all these construction projects when there's no traffic out there. You know, it's an ideal time to do that. And if we can accelerate that work currently, when we have this opportunity and manage to the budget, when we need to pull back, we have the ability to pull back. I think we're in a decent position from a budget perspective.
Madam Chair, I'm done. My question never got answered, and so I'm done with my question. So we can move forward as it relates to this point.
Does anyone else have comment or questions?
I do really quickly, and this is something that I just want to flag for later. I have concerns that we're willing to pay coaches extra money, but we still haven't found a way to increase wages or support others' wages. And with the levy renewal coming back up, what is that going to mean for our teachers and our educators who are out doing this work every day? A lot of them are at increased risk now. Their children are at increased risk as well. And so just very curious around what this is going to mean for a lot of our communities to hear that we're willing to increase the payment for coaches, but not for our educators in a way that is more substantial than it currently has been.
Shara, do you have, you want to comment on that?
I can. We have 2 wage programs that we're running right now. Teacher Promise Grant has been, I think, operating for about a year now. And we just recently, this program or this calendar year, rolled out the staff support funds.
And I understand that, but that's a grant that doesn't cover every lead teacher. It's only for those that apply, correct?
And I agree with you, Bianca, and that is a challenge that we know we're facing going forward. We are in the process now and should be able to report to you in August where we are with those wage pilots and the intentional steps we have taken to say, how do we get to that $15 an hour? What we believe and what was reported to the CPP board before is that many of our preschool teachers are at that $15 an hour for lead teachers.
Well, and I wasn't speaking specifically about just the 15, but I know that there were other things that some of the educators had mentioned that would be helpful. Even if 15 was already attained, what are some other things? Because I know we had even talked about what up to parity would look like with CPS schools. So just being curious and wanting to flag that for our later discussion. I know we don't have time to hash it all out right now on this call, but I think it needs to be flagged for a later discussion, just because if we're talking about the levy, this is going to come up again.
And we are more than willing to prepare that for August to share the final outcomes of those wages and also talk about what, if any, progress has been made by partnering with organizations like the African American Chamber to make those other services like insurance and benefits available to our providers, but also bringing back to you what we've heard directly from the providers based on what their need is. Because that in many ways is guiding what it is. And if a provider says to us, this insurance is still too high, or what we're focused on now is quality rather than wages, we encourage and have that discussion by wages, but in all cases being provider centric and staff of provider centrics to let that drive that work.
But we have spent over a half an hour on one line of this proposal. So there must be an issue here that the board's not comfortable with. I started off by saying 5% just struck me when I looked at across this city, Tri-Health cut their salaries 20% and get ready to lay off a massive number of people. So again, the first thing I saw is 5%. I just don't understand that. That's the optics. Let's start with the optics of 5%. And now we spent well over a half an hour on just one little line. So obviously there's an issue. We need to resolve this now. We're way behind on our time.
Here's a question for Shara and Jacob. These contracts this is June 30th. I don't know what the process is right now with the providers. Please advise the board on whether or not these contracts, if we approve this today, they would be done by next Wednesday. Or if the board is uncomfortable with moving forward, can these contracts be retroactive?
This is Vanessa. I'm back to the compellingness. Pastor Tater said it. Odell just said it. People are making massive cuts. People are going without. So it's like even the verbalization of what I've just heard. One, we put enough flexibility in our budget. Does that mean we fluffed it up so that we can add all this stuff? We're not in a position where we can have flexibility in our budget. The other thing that I am really, really concerned about is having a conversation about provider centric. This was supposed to be child centric. And the wage piece was about their families, the people who are most impacted are the families of these children who work in these centers. And it's the reason why people, it's like, I'm just so confused about this conversation shifting from children being, Preschool Promise was about children being ready for kindergarten. Now, even we had this conversation, children just need to be ready to learn. I'm not hearing about making sure that kids are going to be, preschoolers could be at home if we have a surge or if there's someone sick. I'm not hearing any conversations about putting technology into the families' homes. I'm not hearing the same conversation that I'm hearing in other rooms that is talking about children and families, parents having to play a role as first providers. In the community engagement meeting, the same thing was about providers. And now we're talking about coaching. And I'm not sure if I maybe missed like a meeting, but did we talk about the impact of quality, the data that we were given in the finance committee about, the Black children, Black providers, all the information that seems to be requested never really comes forward, but then we're asked to make all these money decisions meeting after meeting. And again, I'm just going to stress, you go ahead and take the vote. I'm going to vote no for any additional budget increases because of the conversations we're hearing around this country. Around this country, around this state, and around this city, and in our neighborhoods is about people needing to have jobs, and wages are important right now. And Bianca, Bianca brings it up all the time and says, let's flag it for another meeting. We can't keep flagging the real conversations for another meeting and just assume that we're going to go out and hire some fancy marketing company to move a levy forward, and people aren't going to ask were promises kept. And the promises were not just about providers saying what they need. It was around children getting what they need to learn. And this environment has created some impossibilities, some inequities, some new inequities in the learning environment of children that we have yet to have a conversation about. We keep talking about giving more money to coaching, more money to 4Cs, more money to this and that. And I'm just so confused. I put myself on the line for this thing, and
Hello?
Yes. Vanessa, we lost you.
Vanessa,
I know you're muted.
we lost you. Okay. I sense that there's a big unreadiness on the part of some board members. Shara and Jacob, I'm asking, is there flexibility to rethink a July 1st negotiation of these contracts? Because I think we need a roll call vote on this.
So there's,
go ahead.
Shar, you go ahead, and then I'll chime in with a little bit of structure around what we do in either event.
Sure. There is always flexibility. We have had communication with our partners, so they understood that this needed to come to the board for discussion. They are willing to work with us based on what the board decided, and I do not believe that any of our coaching vendors will walk away from the table. They are all listening and participating in this discussion, with the understanding that there are some questions and concerns and more work that needs to be done. So yes, there is an opportunity for more full discussion of this, and I don't think that that will put us in jeopardy of losing our coaching vendors.
Jake?
So my thought is that you should, since we're already gathered here, we're already talking about it, I think that you should put it to a vote to determine whether or not the board is comfortable moving forward. And what that would look like, let me zoom out for a second and say, this is part one of a two-part process. In other words, if you figure out the economics and the obligations, the things that typically go into a statement of work, things like how much are we going to pay them? What do they have to do for that? We will make the agreement say whatever you want it to say. Part two of that is getting the legal stuff to say what the legal stuff should say. I'm very confident that we will get there. That is what we do. That's what we do well. We will make sure you're taken care of. Part one is the tough part. That's what we're talking about right now. I would tell you that if you take it to a vote, and if it passes, then we will do that in the order that I just said. And probably in terms of how we get it done, it will look like Shara, probably Christine, and I will take it, sit down with it, and as a working group, make sure that it says what the board wants it to say. That way you don't have 15 people trying to negotiate a contract. If it fails and the board says we are not comfortable moving forward with this, then I think that Shara and maybe I will be on that phone call as well if you think that's helpful. We'll regroup with 4C and see if we can push for just a straight extension for another year, given not only the uncertainty at the board level of us going forward with this proposal, but also the uncertainty in the world right now. I mean, I think that would be a very good grounds to get them to go with a straight extension. There are no guarantees. It all depends on how well 4C wants to play in the sandbox, but I think that they would be very open to it. My interpretation is that we have a very good relationship with them, and frankly, they need us just like we need them. And so we will work together in whatever form the board decides we should. That's all.
Shara, the contract extension SOW update, Is this the framework for a motion?
It is.
Okay, I need a motion for the contract extension SOW update as proposed.
I move that we adopt.
Speak, who made the motion?
I began to speak, Debbie.
I'm sorry?
I started speaking.
Okay,
I move that we adopt this contract extension SOW update as presented.
okay. Is there a second to the motion?
I will second it.
On a motion by Marcia Futel, seconded by Sally Westheimer, to approve the contract extension SOW update as proposed with billing changes, minimum and maximum hourly billing, inclusive of 5-star coaching, increased management, affirmation of partnership, and enhanced data sharing. I'm going to put this to a roll call vote. Cheryl Rose, yes or no?
Yes.
Marcia Futel,
No.
Terry England,
You're muted, Terry.
is Terry there?
I'm sorry. No.
Okay. Pastor, I'm sorry. Pastor Tate,
No.
Micah Cameras,
Yes.
Bianca Edwards,
No.
Odell Owens,
No.
Vanessa White,
No.
Laura Sang Regret,
No.
Christine Fisher,
No.
Sally Westheimer,
Yes.
Deborah Alsop, yes. Okay, Leslie, were you keeping count of the votes, please?
Yes, let me just count them. And
Could you speak up, please?
yes, I was. Give me a second to count the votes. We have 7 no's and we have 6 yeses.
Okay, Jake and Shara, I want to be clear what the board is saying, and
Who are the yeses?
Leslie? Leslie,
I had Debbie Alsop, yes. Sally Westheimer, yes. Cheryl Rose, yes. Micah Kramers, yes.
Cheryl
So
was,
that's 4, not 6.
and Cheryl
Yeah.
was a no.
No, Cheryl was a yes.
Cheryl
Yeah,
was
I
a
heard
yes.
4. I heard 4 no's. So
Yeah,
who are
there
the
were
other
4
2?
no's.
I had a chat note. Someone said, Laura Sang Regret, you said that was not a correct count.
Yeah, I only heard 4 yeses and the rest were no's.
Right.
Correct. Likewise.
Yeah.
So let's get that straight, please, the numbers on that. Anyway, the motion failed. We need to be clear on what we're asking Shara and the staff to do, since this did not pass. And it had specific numbers on it in terms of billing changes.
This is Marcia, Debbie, if I may.
Go ahead.
I was just listening to the conversation. I think what drove my no vote really was the hourly rate increase, and for the reasons that were given. Just some heartburn around looking at that number going up. While I do appreciate the fact that we do need the coaching and we do need to do whatever needs to be done to bring our centers up and to provide those seats. I think the hourly rate is really what kind of gave me some heartburn. So I don't know how much room you have to negotiate that, Shara, or how that all fits, but the numbers is what really struck me. That's the part I had the heartburn with. So I'm just putting it out there. I do understand the spirit behind what you're doing. I agree with that, but I think just to kind of add to what's already been said about how it appears and the spend and where we are, and we don't know. And if there's a way to maybe do some things when we do kind of see how the return back to school takes place overall, and things kind of shake out in the fall, and just see if we can have some room to negotiate some things later. But right now, that gave me heartburn.
Anybody else want to comment real quickly? If that's the crux of the failure of the vote, I think Shara and Jacob, I would suggest that that you work with the 4C and the other agency as quickly as possible. We do not have another board meeting until August 25th. I believe there's an executive committee meeting earlier in August. I do think as quickly as we can get this back is important, but I think it's very important that we have the full support of the board behind it.
I agree with that, and maybe as a temporary solution to meet in the middle, Shara and I can negotiate a short-term extension, say through the end of the year, with the intention being we need to buy some time, keep the status quo until we can hash out some of the issues that the board has with the proposal as is, because a yes or no vote is helpful, but does not get to the heart of why each individual voted the way that they did.
Exactly.
Right.
How does that sound to the board to move ahead? Keep the status quo until the end of the year. That would be basically a 6-month extension. Okay, I'm getting some nodding of heads. I'd like to hear yes, yeses and nos.
I'm good.
All in favor say yes, please.
Yes.
Yes.
No. Okay, you all are working me too hard. I've been in depositions all day and I'm ready to go to sleep. So we're gonna move real quickly, but we do have an important approval item. The executive committee update, please. And I'm gonna give that on behalf of Father Graham, and he can't ever leave me again. Okay.
Call Emily.
Public policy and advocacy. Can I see that slide, please?
Call Emily.
Okay. About 6 weeks or so, Shara was asked to sign on to an advocacy effort by CPS to advocate for more funding for public education K through 12. I think there was a very short window on that, and the executive committee has given some guidance that we really do need a public policy and advocacy, if you will, policy. So what Shara and the executive committee sketched out were basically the areas from which a policy would be developed and brought back to this board as early as August this year. There are a lot of there's a lot of things going on out there with respect to advocacy, legislation, and we want to be able to have Shara move very quickly as our executive director. So part of the proposal was that until we get a policy approved by the board, with the understanding that these would be the issues for consideration, Shara would have our support to determine where preschool promise could or would weigh in, with the understanding that there would be a board member that she could work with who would be a content specialist in the area that would be affected. So she would have another set of eyes and ears, and it would go back through the executive committee and board as a reporting out. So that's what we have before us. Jake and Shara will be responsible for drafting a policy for us to take a look at in August. Have I set that framework, Shara, Jacob?
That
Yes.
sounds right.
Anybody have any questions on these areas or comments? Okay, next slide. Public policy and, okay.
Can I go? I'm sorry. I was just, I'm just gonna, I don't see anything around children. In K to 12 policy, I just don't see how you don't have anything in here for parents.
Could you go back, Leslie? That looks like a second page.
Where is it?
All right,
Yeah,
here's the first page.
Yeah, parents and family, and they have a role. We should be advocating for parents and families,
So
child caregivers.
absolutely open to suggestions on how those specific things will be added, and we'll be happy to add those. I guess to have those specifically called out. These are high level points, of which there are many permutations and actually things that go with that. But I am absolutely open and welcome the suggestion. If you think there are specific points that state parents and relate parents that need to be included, I'm happy to add those.
Yeah, I think it's pretty high level. Yes, I'll suggest something. No problem.
Oh, okay, let's move on to carryover spending resolution information update. Okay, I'm gonna ask Shara to kind of tee this up for us because we talked about it at our last executive committee. I think this was talked about at the F&A committee recently. I don't remember if this is the board's first eyes on it, but we certainly have had this conversation at least for the last 2 years at a pretty high level about policies around unspent preschool expansion funds.
So in May, there was a discussion at the board meeting and as well as the subsequent executive committee meetings that CPP had adopted a carryover spend policy on how those levy dollars that had not been spent in each year were then pooled and then would be expended. We learned that that policy had not been completely followed in every ways with the purchase of the Mozart building by CPS. And at that time, my request was, and there was an agreement among the board to say, how do we formalize what that carryover spend policy is into a resolution that both boards would sign and agree to on how those funds would be expended so that neither side was surprised or did not plan for or expect expenditure of those funds that are, for lack of a better word, haven't been spent, that have been pooled and are remaining based on levy dollars that have been there. This is the result of that resolution that has been drafted by Jake with input from the executive committee and others. The board voted at the May meeting to delegate to the executive committee to draft and review that initial policy. That was done. This is the version that was approved by that executive committee, and we're bringing it to the board for information. It has also been shared with Superintendent Mitchell and is on the agenda for discussion at our internal implementation work group meeting, which will happen this Friday.
Leslie, would you move to the other slides related to this? this document around the policy regarding unspent funds at fiscal year actually started out in December of 2017, was approved by the Board of Managers in January of 18, and that was the last update to this document that you see here. Leslie, let's keep moving, please. Anybody have any questions or comments on the status of the carryover spending resolution? Okay, finance and audit. We have one approval item, and I will ask Cheryl Rose to talk about the Form 990 for this current fiscal year, which I believe is due to be filed by, is it July 1st or 15th?
Thank you, Debbie. And so we have this approval item, which everyone should have received for pre-read from Leslie. And then we'll do a quick update on the budget as it stands, along with forecast for the year. So, so the Form 990, as you recall, we did have to pull that back because we wanted to make changes to one of the schedules that were very important, creating an outline of preschools that receive more than $5,000 in QI funding. So that has been done. The form's been completed. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review that. So today it's to us to approve that Form 990 for filing.
Does anyone have any questions on or comments about the Form 990? Okay, I'm going to ask you.
Before you move, I have a question not about the form, but the signatures. So are the signatures from those of us who were not on the board required for this? I didn't think so, but maybe that's I have a question.
I can't hear you. Marcia, you're breaking up.
My question is about the approval itself, because it looks like it's a revised 990. Would it need approval from those of us who were not on the board for that fiscal year?
I will go.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I don't believe so. Hector will know for certain, but it's my understanding that it should be those who were on the board at the time of the filing. I mean, at the time of the fiscal year end.
And it is not a revised one. It is the original one still.
Okay.
And all we're requesting is permission to file it from the board at this time. The signature actually would be, I believe it's my signature at the bottom, but it's be with the board's permission that I file it.
Marcia, does that answer your question?
I think so. Okay. Yes.
There is a schedule in there. There is a question in there that asks whether or not the board of directors has reviewed this and signed off on it. I'm not sure exactly which page, but it's the current board. Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other comments? Cheryl, will you make a motion, please?
Yes. So do we have a motion for the approval to file the Form 990 as the draft stands?
Is there a second?
Second, Terry.
Okay. We're not going to do a roll call vote on this. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any no votes? Abstentions? Thank you. Motion passed. All right, Cheryl, financial results today.
Yes, and this will be brief because just the way the dates fell versus closing the books. The budget that you see in front of you is results through April along with forecast for May and June. I think the things that are important to note is that we do believe we will end the fiscal year with no less than $1 million in underspend, possibly as much as 1.5 million. and just to give some perspective around this, the fiscal year 19 underspend was 2.9 million. So it is significantly less. But with that, I didn't have any other significant updates here unless there are any questions that we could answer.
Okay. Moving on to the governance report. I will give that report very briefly. There are 5 board members who are in the class of 2020, whose term ends in September. All 5 board members have agreed to be renominated, and those board members by nominating organization are Odell Owens and Deborah Alsop from Cincinnati Public Schools, from United Way of Greater Cincinnati, Gary Lindgren and Anthony Hobson, and from Promise Forward, Pastor Tate. There is a letter that is being sent to the respective board chairs, notifying them of the end of terms and suggesting in the letter that the individuals who are currently serving in those seats have expressed enthusiastic willingness to continue to serve based upon their pleasure to so nominate. So we're asking the boards to get back to us by about the 15th of August with their nominations for this class, and the terms would end in 2023. There is in your packet, this is a skills and asset summary that goes out to the nominating organizations. Thank you for those of you who filled out the skills asset survey. There are several areas which we need on this board: technology, a preschool educator, director, or owner, and a media and public relations person. So we will ask the nominating organizations to consider that in their decisions. The next thing that was sent out to you is a draft of a board of managers, board chair job description. Father Graham will be leaving us on the 1st of December. I think the board has been duly notified of that. And so the governance committee and the executive committee have had an opportunity to list some characteristics, leadership traits that we think are desirable and needed in our next board chair. Is this a 2-pager?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're asking for board feedback on this. If you have any suggestions, it would be helpful to get them back to me as the governance chair. United Way is the trusted entity still. And the way we were incorporated, United Way, the first class of officers nominated or appointed the chair, the secretary, and the treasurer. And then looking at where this goes from here, we are suggesting that we need to follow the same course of action. It may change in the future, but at some point real shortly, we would like to sit down with Maura Ware and possibly the board chair from United Way to talk about selection of a board chair starting in December 2020.
So, Ms. Debbie, can I ask a question? I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Vanessa. That was because we were just beginning. Are you saying we have to follow the, I'm used to a board actually selecting its officers. So why aren't we doing that now?
I'm gonna, Pastor Tate, did you have a comment? And then I'm gonna ask Jake to chime in on this, please.
Well, I think it's similar too, because I serve on probably seven boards, and they're all different, but the chair there's always been a succession plan. So going back to the original entity based on the structure. We were a startup at that point, but somewhere in our bylaws, we never put in the structure of how the chair is chosen. And so because it's been void, I'm assuming we're using this structure to go back to the United Way, when really it's not the United Way's role to choose a chair. It's the board's role to choose a chair.
Jake?
Right.
Right. I think it's less about the formal process and more about the fact that if Father Graham comes off the board, there will be a vacancy which must be filled by United Way. And this board, really, it's kind of going to be an organic process in terms of who you want in Father Graham's place. If you think that there's somebody on the board right now that could fill that place and that we could nominate, forget for a second about the technical process. I know that that sounds strange, but just forget about what mechanisms are set forth in the governance principles. The idea is somebody is going to replace Father Graham, and that somebody will come from either on the board or outside of the board. With one vacancy being created by Father Graham's absence, you have an opportunity for that external member to come onto the board. And so those.
But it doesn't mean that they are appointed as a chair.
That does not mean they're appointed as a chair. You're right.
Right. I think that was what I was trying to clarify. Debbie said that the United Way had appointed them because we were just starting out and that we would go in that same direction. But I'm questioning why at this point in our maturity does the United Way get to appoint a chair, a secretary, and a treasurer again, and why we wouldn't vote on who those folks are.
There should always be a full board vote in terms of who will be the board chair.
We've never been able to vote
On
or
what?
nominate. We've never been able to nominate and or vote. We've been told who they are by the executive committee when in actuality, we even had a conversation about the executive committee cannot, even there was a comment earlier that the executive committee approve something when they
Vanessa,
really can only recommend.
I would like to clarify the board governance principles state that the governance committee recommends to the board, and the board has voted on the secretary and the treasurer, and I believe the board chair.
Without nominations. They were suggested both times.
That is correct, by the governance committee per the governance principles. So what I hear you saying is that you would like to see that changed.
Yeah, I think we should revisit it. Yeah, because it feels, it feels stacked, quite frankly. Like no one else has a chance to even nominate. No one else has a chance. The governance committee goes in a room, they don't even ask the board for recommendations, and then they go in a room and decide who they want to bring forward and then put them in front of the board, only one person per seat. And so who do you vote for but the people you bring forward? There's never been a vote of, there's never been anybody able to recommend anybody. So it continues. So it was you all originally, and then you came back and said, the executive committee and the governance committee recommends we stay the same. That is not I don't think that is a process that should continue, because I don't think it feels very transparent or, quite frankly, fair to other people who may want to have an opportunity to nominate someone or sit in those seats.
Okay, I take what you're saying, Vanessa. We have a governance committee meeting the end of July, I believe. We have some time to look at all aspects of it, but I'm going to go back to our current governance principles and see what those principles say. And if we have to make changes in those principles, I think it's important for us to do that before, going forward. So I appreciate what you're saying. Let the minutes note Vanessa's comments, and that we will take due consideration based on our governance principles. And if anybody has any comments on this document, again, I would appreciate it if you would get back to me or to Shara because these are characteristics of that at least have been, Father Graham has looked at these governance committee, and we welcome comments from the board. The next item is a levy committee recommendations. And I wanna ask Shara to tee this up. We talked about some specific committee recommendations from CPP for the levy committee. Shara, you want to give us a little background on the work of the levy committee, please?
Sure. CPS is formally convening a levy committee to look at strategy for moving forward with the levy and to help make the decision about whether or not the levy will go on the ballot this year and strategy related to that. There are currently proposed about 15 to 16 different entities, groups, individuals represented on that levy committee, including 3 members from CPS, 1 from the audit committee, representatives from AFSCME, from CFT, from the NAACP. The request has also been for 3 members of CPP to serve on that levy committee as well.
Shara, I'll gladly join. This is Bianca.
Okay, we have some recommendations. And there are 2 different types of committees. One is a working
I'm
committee.
sorry, you have a recommendation for the levy committee already? You have recommendations?
Yes, that came from the executive committee. And we can discuss after the presentation of the names. Father Graham as the chair of CPP, Cheryl Rose as the treasurer, Marcia Futel, and Terry England is on the committee as a representative, not from CPP, but from the child care community, as on behalf of child care directors. So I will open discussion.
I would like to, so Bianca is the CPP's recommendation. So I would like to recommend Bianca fully. She is our parent representative at the board, and that I firmly believe needs to be at the table. And I think that that's really strong recommendation here.
So would you clarify, please, the statement of CPP's parent
Well, she quite frankly,
representative?
when we were putting forth people and we looked at the board and we said, what's not represented on this board? And it's someone who actually has a parent in preschool. I mean, who has children in preschool, which I think is critical to the process. I think, I mean, I'm just saying that we have the district's treasurer. It is a district levy if we want to go back and forth. But I strongly believe that someone who has children in preschool and who's been an educator as well. And Bianca, this goes back to exactly what we just talked about, is that the executive committee already brings forward something they want us to it feels like rubber stamping that it sounds like everybody you just mentioned was somebody you all selected. You did not even query anyone else on the board to see if they recommended anybody. And I think it's important for her to be able to volunteer and be able to sit at that table if that's where she chooses to be. So if you want to get 4 seats or
just for correction, comment, Christine is a preschool parent, and she was nominated by CPS as a preschool parent. I just want to make that clarifying comment.
Okay, well, maybe I should just be a little more direct. The majority of the children that we are talking about are Black and brown. And so I think it's important to have someone who is Black and brown who is having a different experience to be able to have a voice at that table.
Well, and I also have experience running levies as well. So with it being the levy, if that's what we're moving on, I also have experience running and managing levies as well as being a part of them. So I can also volunteer that experience as well, not just having a Black child that is in preschool, but also being a person who has worked with the community before on levies and moved them and sat with them and listened with them and partaken in conversation with them around what their actual needs are instead of their perceived needs. I would gladly
That's an
volunteer
extra
myself to be on
bonus.
there.
Well, I tell you, I appreciate the comments. Again, Shara, you need to unmute. Please unmute yourself. We really need I need some direction here. The board needs some direction because I don't want to get this into, Black, brown, white, etc. Those are all important issues. I think that we need to be sure that we are solidly, in place on that committee. And we were told we could have 3 people. Is that correct, Shara?
That is correct. I advocated for more, and the request was really that it be limited to 3 CPP representatives.
Well, I mean, I think that this is a fair question. I'm not advocating it for it, but if any of the 3 people who were nominated want to withdraw their names in favor of Bianca, that's an option.
Yeah, and this is Cheryl. I think our objective is to get great representation on the committee. I have no vested interest necessarily on having it to be me. If Bianca is a better representative for us, by all means, I'd be gladly withdraw.
But if Father Graham is leaving, why is he on the committee? And how engaged is going to be if he's leaving by the end of the year?
Shara?
I think he made the commitment to work on the levy committee as part of his last service to CPP. I believe that he will honor and uphold that commitment. That is a discussion that we had that said, is this an additional task that you can take on with the historical knowledge that you bring to the table for that? And his response was yes.
Let me ask this question another way. Cheryl has volunteered to withdraw from the group. That would keep us within our 3. I do think it's important for Father Graham to be one of the 3. What is the pleasure of the board?
And one more question. What is the life of this committee? This committee is going to start when, and when would it end? When would their work end?
Planning to convene the 1st or 2nd week in July. Their work should end after the conclusion of the levy, depending on the outcome. I mean, it will depend on if the levy does go on the ballot. If it is approved, then it's likely that most of their work will be completed. If it does not, is not successful, I'm sure there will be some reevaluation of who the committee members need to be on the ongoing basis. So the lifetime is expected July to November.
Okay.
All right.
And thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I just want to get us to get this done. Whatever it takes.
And I thank you too, Cheryl. Is it the pleasure of the board, without voting, that the representatives to CPP, this is a short task, it's very intensive, And the expectation is that we'll be well represented in attendance and thought at these meetings. So our representatives as recommended are Bianca Edwards, Father Graham, and Marcia Futel. All in favor, without voting, nod your head or wave your hand. All right, thank you. Moving on to community engagement. Pastor Tate?
All right, can I make one clarification? Is Marcia selected, as you mentioned, NAACP? Is that why Marcia was selected as a rep for NAACP?
Marcia is a CPS representative in the category of NAACP.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Yep.
No, Debbie, let me clarify that. I think, was the question not, is she the representative for the NAACP on the levy committee? Because I think they're appointing somebody else.
No.
Representing Preschool Promise.
Yes, NAACP will have their own appointee to the levy committee.
Okay, so this is just 3 from CPP. The committee will be larger.
Yes, sure. How many people are on the levy committee?
I think the discussion last was between 12 to 15, maybe as much as 17. I have to nail down to make sure that the entities were represented. But yes, there is, the NAACP has been asked to appoint a representative. That is separate and apart from the 3 Cincinnati Preschool Promise representatives.
But, you know, I think it's worth just noting that the role, I think, of these, to me, thinking about fiduciary responsibility of these individuals is specific to representing the interest of CPP as a whole. Is that fair to say?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
All right, community engagement, Pastor Tate.
Debbie, I think Pastor Tate has left.
I'm sorry?
I think Pastor Tate has left the meeting. Someone else is going to have to give an update.
Okay. Who do you suggest give the update, Shara? Can Lakeisha give the update?
Well, I would like to ask if Vanessa, would you like to give it as a member of the Community Engagement Committee?
I missed the last, hold up. I missed the last meeting, but I'm happy to share where we are.
Sure.
All
okay,
right.
So we have been speaking, did he give a, yes. So we've been talking a lot about how to expand our messaging. And you see the bullet points is, you know, in talking about like, even with this shift, like expanding like learning opportunities, how do we look at our website? How do we look at Facebook page? How do we look at, as this says, making CPP a household name and not just talking about enrollment as we have. So using everything we have to move from enrollment to almost kind of like the policy bullets. What's important about early childhood education? What's important about the role of the providers and the quality and stuff like that. So most of what we see right now is enrollment. We just want to move toward a broader message so that, and also giving parents tools. We've talked about looking at other websites. We talked a lot in the beginning about putting some learning opportunities on our website. So reevaluating our website and making sure that it's user-friendly to any and everyone that would go to it. Some of the other websites like in Dayton and Denver have learning tools for parents to go to. And so we also want to help and assist with the things that folks are challenged with, both in this environment and otherwise, to make sure that our community engagement and our messaging is a help and not stagnant. So we're trying to revamp it and make it more actionable.
And I would be remiss if I didn't extend a special thank you to Vanessa and to Pastor Tate and to Pastor Leslie, who got in the room with all of us and said, this is what we're seeing and this is how we think the messaging can be expanded. We have to be true to our mission and what our objective is, but there are opportunities and how that messaging can be expanded to make CPP more relevant and to really, really adjust to what we see in the times. So we appreciate that input from that, and that's how you'll start to see those expanded messaging pieces coming out.
Any questions on community engagement?
This is Marcia. Just real quick, if you can put that slide up. So the reopening work group, how does that tie to what I'm seeing?
So that was a new piece that we joined with other partners that are focused on that. And thanks to 4C for inviting us to be a part of that, to help, and the Southwest Ohio AEYC. That is really a different way that we engage providers outside of just the CPP realm. And it was a series of webinars that prepared for reopening. It was a large group session, then break-off sessions where small groups of providers came together to talk about specific concerns and issues. As a CPP team, it gave us an opportunity to see what are the growing concerns, how do we address them in a new and different way. Big group webinars, small group breakoffs, intense sessions of frank discussions. And that was a series that was had the week before reopening that were kind of intense to really say, how do we do engagement in a different way of providers other than traditional surveys and ongoing calls?
Thank you.
And
Okay,
thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize, I stepped away. Thank you, Shara and Dr. White, for teeing it up. I do also want to appreciate Lakeisha Ely for her, really her tenacity, for making sure that our report today spelled out exactly what we were trying to accomplish. There are a couple of other things that we want to bring to the forefront. I think I heard Dr. White as I was coming back on, try to communicate or convey those things. We are looking at the data. We want to study the data. We want to know, let the data speak and help us to understand, again, what people are saying and what people are doing, so that we can make sure that we are relevant and our messaging is relevant and getting to the right target audience. We know that parents are a separate target audience than providers. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping the parents informed, and to Charles' point, engaging with them separate from providers, but knowing that our link is through the provider. So making sure that there is a pipeline there, so that we can make sure that we stay in the heart of the parent who actually has to make the final decision whether they're going to participate by enrolling their children in a center that is quality rated.
Thank you, Pastor Tate. Thank you, community engagement. We're moving on to CPS update. Vera?
Yes, good afternoon. It's nice to see everyone, and thank you for allowing me this few minutes, and I'll make this fast because I know the time's ticking. So the previous slide before this one, there is a link that, thank you, Shara and Leslie, for putting this on there. This is the complete board meeting from last night that has the 5 models that our leadership team, working with all of us, has presented to the board for consideration. So the link is there. So I'm not going to go through that whole presentation because many of us were up till 10 o'clock watching the presentation, but it is there. So I just wanted to give you a few highlights of how we're preparing and looking towards our future of schools, no matter what model it might be. So our first bucket is safety and health. Just as the providers, as we're very grateful that they have been opening over these last couple of weeks very successfully, we're learning from them. So we will be doing our health assessments, meals in classrooms, and we have had a team of teachers that we have been working with that are looking at creative classroom models for us. We also are looking and working with other partners such as Children's Hospital and other departments within our district to really look at the practices, and working very closely with who we call Safety Cindy. and also Sarah Trimble Oliver to make sure all safety and health protocols are in place. We're also revisiting piece by piece all of the roles and responsibilities of staff. And from that, we're looking at how those roles and responsibilities might look different when we return, and how their roles might change in a way that they can support students, families, and also each other at the school sites. For the next bucket, we're looking definitely at social emotional supports, at varying levels from tier 1 all the way up to tier 3. We're collaborating with Carrie Bunger and some other partners that we are looking at how that might look back, not only as supports within our classrooms or schools, but also how can we integrate it more into our curriculum, no matter if we're in person or remote. We're also looking at the equity piece. We are revisiting our curriculum. We had started looking at a new adoption last year. So we have been in touch with like Creative Curriculum and others to look at how can we tie those pieces together in a preschool, playful, thematic way to help support students, families, and also our staff. And then the last bucket, and I'm talking real fast, is the accelerated student learning. We will be following CPS calendar next year. All of us, do the phase-in at the beginning. We are using one technology platform for all pre-K through grade 12, and that is Schoology. Staff is able to use that one platform to also use like Google Meets, Dojo, a variety of whatever a teachers feel most comfortable with, except for Zoom. We haven't gotten permission for that one yet. But we are looking at that different ways. We are also looking at, we were able to get all of our preschoolers, all of our K-12 had emails for Schoology. We have now been able, as we are enrolling students, the student is automatically provided a email. So the teachers and staff will be able to connect more, knowing the preschooler is not going to be on the email, but the parent will be able to use that email to access not only interaction or engagement with their preschool staff, but also they might have a child who's in 4th grade, 9th grade. So it'll be a one-stop place that a parent can go to. We're also looking at ways that as we've been registering and enrolling families, we're asking 3 simple questions. Do you have technology in your home other than a phone? Do you have Wi-Fi? And I'm trying to think of the third question. I forgot the third question, but we're getting that information up front. We know many families have, because a lot of our families are saying yes, but then we're trying to find ways for those families that say no. How can we follow our process and sign them out an iPad, because that's what we use for pre-K to 1st grade. How can we provide them an iPad? And if they don't have Wi-Fi, how can we go ahead and upload specific educational programs that would help them in the home? So the distance in person 5 days a week is my dream, but I don't know if it'll happen, or blended learning. That's a board decision. And I already talked about reviewing the curriculum. And then the last piece, we really are focusing on how we can support the parents and families. That was one of the big things that as we spoke with parents, as we got surveys, we saw that, balancing just life, but then also trying to provide a sound instruction at home was difficult. So we have broken it down with the certified teachers I'm working with this month. We are breaking it down to things that should be taught in the classroom and things that could be reinforced or taught at home. So we are dividing the buckets up. And then we are creating what we're calling kind of a to-go home kit for each quarter of the curriculum that we are then putting the materials in there. We've been collaborating with Crowns to Computers and others. So every parent will go home with a to-go kit that if we have to go out fast or if we're in session and it's one day remote, the materials are there. Things like Unifix cubes and things like that. We've looked at the CRAW data and the grade 1 map to find especially areas to focus in language and literacy and mathematics.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Vera. This is Vanessa.
Hats off to Shara, because Shara has been my faithful partner every week. We communicate, and it's been really good meeting with Lakeisha and Laura and just the whole CPP team as we continue to figure this out.
So does that mean, this is Vanessa, does that mean you're going to share your
Yes,
resource?
that means I'm going to share.
Awesome.
Where we're at right now, and Shara knows we're going to share, but where we're at right now is the team of teachers is like in the middle of the work. So we are getting things together that, like the family to go packs, that could be something that we could look at that, you know, we could provide on both sides.
That'd be great.
And the sharing is already happening. To give Vera and her team credit, we meet every other week, and the team that CPP brings is not only the staff, but we also make sure there's at least one family childcare provider, multi-center provider, and single site center provider who are sitting at that table to say, what are the things that we can exchange in terms of information and build on that. So all of the things that you see that are here that CPS is doing, absolutely in partnership with CPP and a representative group of providers.
Yeah, I meant more the curriculum pieces.
Vera, is Terry.
Hi, Terry.
Hi. As far as the technology for the preschoolers and the email that you said, will that email follow them through from preschool all the way through 12?
All the way through. That will be their email that they're assigned as long as they're in a CPS school.
Okay. The other question is,
but they will keep it.
Great. What about the children from homeless families? How are we reaching out to them?
We have a collaboration with Project Connect. So we actually work with them, and we have a location that we go with the shelters, or we connect with the families that no matter where they're at. And then we get them, and this is for all grades, preschool all the way through, that we do this. But we ensure that they have the materials and the supplies that they need, and Project Connect supplies the transportation.
Okay, could that information be shared with the centers as well? Because we do have families that are homeless.
And I believe Shara and I have had conversations with Rebecca Beach with Project Connect. But yes. And with the technology, we weren't really sure, but then I discovered that CPS for grades, all the other grades, already has a process in place for, like, the parents, they do have to come pick it up and sign.
Right.
That they have that they have an iPad.
Okay. Okay, great. That's fantastic. Thank you.
But we're trying to think of other ways, and I can take no credit for this. This is all a great group of educators that really have been working hard the whole month of June. I know it's only been 2 weeks so far, but they've really been working hard.
That's great.
And they're coming up with things, because I just put it out there saying, you got to think of every parent and every situation a family might be in. And then we have to find a way to provide a quality, in the spring, we just kind of had to throw things together. We did the best we could. I want to give a hats off to Laura San Regret, because I know she's out there somewhere in video land, because they really did come together to put things together. But now we need to make it that it is the curriculum being rolled out in any way we can to help families So kids are learning.
Exactly. And as little interruption as possible.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Vera.
Thank you.
Debbie,
Thank you, Vera.
I have a question for Ms. Brooks. Hi, it's Marcia.
Hey, Marcia.
I was on the board meeting last night, and I know there's a lot of concern about the safety part of this. And so the guidelines for preschools, as I read them, are different than the ones that are K through 12 from a social distancing perspective. So how will those classrooms look for the preschoolers, given those guidelines? And what out of the box recommendations can you all recommend to to our centers about how to maintain? Because 3 and 4 year olds are not going to stay 6 feet apart. They're just not going to do that. And so how will those classrooms look in the landscape of the board's pending decision?
Yes. So we do have a group of teachers that have been creating some model classrooms. And what they have done within those guidelines of the 35 square foot, and then you need the 6 foot divider between 2 groups of 9. They have used furniture, and then we are working with our facilities team on teachers have requested that it not be all one material. Like they want some of it to be like a clear plexiglass that the teacher could be standing on one side but could be giving a lesson to both sides. Along with, they were asking for a divider to be like a that you can write on, another piece be like a bulletin board type thing. And then they are actually looking at the learning stations and looking at, okay, on this side we can focus in on these stations, on the other side on that would be other stations. So, and then we are creating markers. I've been working with one of our partners, and they really, infectious disease at Children's really investigated, you know, it's hard to get a 3 or 4 year old to wear a mask.
Right.
So I said, you know, what about shields? Give the parents the option. If they want the child to wear the mask and the child will, that's great. But could we use some kind of shields? They got back with me today with some advice on that. So we're looking at some kind of prototype that if we can get a child to wear a mask, great. But then also having a shield for those kids, because we don't want our teachers spending all day, put on your mask, pick up your mask, washing a mask, you know. So we're trying to, and Shara's team has been really great. We've all been investigating what are the best ways to keep sanitation going, to keep safety going. So we're starting to make those bullets out that I will share of what some of our protocols will be. And also we want to make sure that we're making it a very safe environment for our staff, because we want them every day. They're the experts. So how can we ensure that they're also being protected as best we can, because most of our teaching staff is up in age, we'll say. So we do have to take that into consideration and really try to make it the safest environment we can. So we do have, and I'll send the pictures, I'll share them with Shara to get out to you all. They don't have all the pieces of the puzzle there, but kind of get an idea of how we're looking at classrooms.
Great.
And this is Vanessa. I would think that, you know, I mean, because we've had some learnings from the summer.
Yes.
Because we had pandemic sites and you all had to close, that this is a great opportunity for sharing and partnering, and even looking at the data in terms of, you know, our understanding what happens if, I think I was most compelled by the transportation piece, how tough that is for the district to have to think about spacing kids on the bus and double buses, whereas parents drop off. Kind of, you know, two different processes, but definitely, you know, from some of the pandemic sites, I would think that there's some learnings that can be shared that you probably are already sharing.
And
that will help you all make some decisions too.
And,
So not
that,
only-
that's a challenge. I mean, first of all, I'm thankful I'm not in transportation. But the second is we've been in a lot of discussion, and we are open to any ideas about our preschool disabilities children.
Oh yeah, that was a big deal.
Are, very fragile or autistic.
Right.
And so they have sensory, that's on a bus, that's going to be difficult.
Right. Wearing a mask or a shield is going to be very difficult for them.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you for the update. Okay, we've spent a lot of time on some very important items. I do not want to shortchange Shara, so I ask for you all to hang in there so that she can give the type of report that we need to hear. Shara, it's your turn.
Thank you. I will say, thank you, Vera. And I think a lot of lessons are being learned from providers and families very rapidly since the June 1st opening in terms of how they're doing subdividing, how they're doing safety protocols, and those lessons will be very beneficial as CPS continues to plan its reopening in the fall. I will say that on Monday, ODJFS issued new kind of protocols for if there is a COVID exposure. CPP is also doing our due diligence to make sure that when that happens, we are there to support parents that have very limited alternatives. We are clear with the messaging as well as supporting the providers to do that. And I would ask that if anyone hears of or gets calls of preschool providers having exposures at their site, that they kind of direct those questions to our staff team to do messaging and address. That will be aligned with the recommendations that JFS made. Some of the closures that we've seen, some have been for 48 hours and some of them have been for 2 weeks based on the level of exposure. Just to give an update too, we're on track with our evaluation from Innovations. We expect to receive July 1, the initial draft of that, and are still waiting for final drafts from Crane. They have been doing a lot of work during the pandemic to survey those teachers and get those results from us as well. We have also refocused on our equity policy, and Innovations will be helping us look at our equity rubric to make sure that we can give a snapshot of that for inclusion in our annual report this year. We have shared some initial information with the Community Engagement Committee on how we're doing in spending regarding those equity core principles. I already mentioned the implementation committee meeting that is happening on Friday with CPS. The team will continue to be out in the field on Mondays and Fridays, visiting providers at a safe distance, engaging with parents at a safe distance. We'll also be launching, you'll see on the next slide, some new parent engagement initiatives, and those include a tool called Ready Rosie that Creative Curricula is tied to, that they've used very effectively in Dayton and other preschool promises to say, how do we engage parents and providers a little bit differently, help them with that remote learning and expanding the learning environment beyond the classroom. And I can see Ms. Terry nodding her head. Most people have positive feedback from Ready Rosie, so that will be launched with 20 providers, both on the QI and the TA side, in partnership with their parents. Our Facebook parent Facebook page is growing. We're doing some things on that are a little unconventional with our Motivation Mondays and spoken word to reach out and touch and have engagement with parent on a regular basis, as well as doing an education chat. And that is basically a webinar roundtable where we have providers and parents in the space open to the public to do a very frank Q&A on what's happening now in the early childhood education community and what's happening with the preschool promise. So challenging questions they may want to address about safety, what's going on, what they heard and what they know. We really wanted to create a space and time to have a frank and honest conversation about that. And that will be coming up in July. So that is a snapshot to kind of is a companion to the narrative written report that was provided as well.
Any questions or comments? I have a comment.
My comment is these things look fantastic. Just wanted to make sure, is all the provider and the parents, is that being done through Facebook? Is that what you said?
So Motivational Monday is through Facebook. The educational chat is through Zoom to be able to do that. The Talk About It Tuesday is a recorded webinar that's accessed YouTube or website, because we're trying different platforms, knowing that everybody doesn't have the same level of accessibility or the same tools.
So if I could ask you to just research one thing, because of the Zoom, you don't get to have like the public input or hear from the public like we used to. And I think that's why the district uses Blue Jeans. So if you could, because I know we had talked about our September meeting being some kind of organizational meeting, but I do get leery about the fact that the public can't access our meetings or speak or have that public hearing.
We can make that available. We're working to make that available. We will research it. That will be provided. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to the observers' comments. I see Vera Brooks here. Vera, do you have any comments as an observer? You gave us a great report.
You guys are wonderful. Keep on going, and we're going to get through all this together.
I don't see Greg Landsman on here. And I don't see Maura on here as an observer. Okay, we're getting there. I have one more comment before I entertain a motion to adjourn. We've covered a lot of ground today. I want to thank everyone for your time. I want to thank you for the content of your comments. You know, we can only get better, and we are getting better. And we are, I think about 3.5 years ago, we've come a mighty long way. And so I appreciate, and I want to really give a shout out to Shara and the staff, because if you think about the changes that we've all gone through since COVID-19 came upon us, this staff has really pivoted. It's been resilient. And, you know, I just want to thank you. And I think the board owes you, you know, high fives and kudos. And I know it's not easy. So Shara, flash your picture back up there.
So thank you very much. And I say that it is possible because of the input from all of the members on the Board of Managers, and really to every single member of the staff who have, as you said, hung in there, who have excelled in a difficult time, and don't want to miss our extended staff, kind of contractor people, Laura Carr and Kim Bolden as our P team members as well, but really have been incredible to say, how do we do this differently? And we take everything from this meeting as an opportunity for us to grow and improve, and we appreciate that.
Right, wonderful.
Now, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, and I will give Laura San Regret the first chance at it. This is her moment. Laura?
I motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Hey, Laura, I saw you in your refrigerator. All in favor?
I'm
Aye. Anybody opposed?
No.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Laura, I miss my eggs.